There is a huge trading opportunity coming up that you have identified. You can trade this opportunity with several stocks and or products. You want to make sure you maximize the profit in this special trade. In this video, you will learn how professional traders seize a special trading opportunity. Hi, I'm Mike Bellafiore, co-founder of S&B Capital, and we're a proprietary trading firm located in Midtown Manhattan. And I'm also the author of the trading classic, One Good Trade, and the playbook. Let's get to work on giving you a glimpse of some of the trading that goes on inside of a proprietary trading firm for these special trading opportunities.
So this is a trade following the first vaccine news, and it's kind of a long-short basket to capitalize on the vaccine rotation. And for relative strength and weakness-wise for the basket, stay-at-home names were very weak on this day, and then the reopening plays were very strong. And that's pretty obvious in hindsight, but there's a lot of opportunity within a bunch of those categories. So I'll get started off with the vaccine news, and this is three Mondays ago, the first vaccine, and they released a 90% effective vaccine, and this was seen as a very viable way to control the coronavirus, which we previously haven't had. And Dr. Fauci had a few times announced that he would have been happy with a 50 to 60% effective vaccine. And then Pfizer came out with 90%, which was a huge beat versus the market expectations. And then also the CEO kind of hyped it up. He said this is the most significant medical advance in the last century, which I saw as a pretty bold statement, but this got investors very excited. And then lastly, there's a lot of worries about Joe Biden having another potential lockdown. And after this vaccine and then the few other ones that rolled out, this pretty much vanished. The risk of another lockdown seems very, very unlikely now. A lot of the names that have been hit the hardest from the pandemic caught a huge bid following this news. So these are all the different categories that were most beneficial to the vaccine. Travel was probably the most important, with airlines and cruise lines. I've listed some of the top traded airlines and cruise lines there. Rideshare also got a pretty big bid with Uber and Lyft. And then you can go into the entertainment, theme parks, and movie theaters, as well as hotel and leisure. I was trading Wynn this day, and Wynn was very strong along with some of the other kind of top tier hotel chains. And then oil was definitely the hardest hit sector during the pandemic, with a lot of their demand sharply declining. Airlines were using less oil and gasoline, as well as the lockdowns and work from home restricted a lot of driving, which definitely isn't as impactful as the airlines. And then financials also caught a pretty big bid, with JP Morgan leading this category. And a lot of people looked at this as a kind of like a leadership rotation out of these growth and tech names that kind of pushed the market higher during the whole March kind of V bottom, as well as the coronavirus, and then a rotation more into value and cyclical names. And then on the relative weakness side, a lot of these leaders that have been kind of pushing the market higher during these times were hit drastically hard, with Zoom and Peloton definitely being kind of like the top two names a lot of people were looking to trade when this vaccine news came out. Zoom and Peloton have ran crazy amount from some of their lows back in March. And then Roku and Netflix were also two names that were very strong in the stay-at-home category, and Pinterest. And then online retailers took a pretty big hit too, with Shopify, Amazon, Wayfair, and Etsy. And then healthcare, some of the online healthcare categories like Teladoc was a big name that caught a massive bid during the pandemic. And then some of these gaming names, Activision, EA, Take-Two. And then just a lot of individual tech names that were overextended. The week prior, a lot of these caught a huge bid with speculation of a Biden presidency and a Republican Senate. that kind of narrative has shifted a little bit with these Georgia runoffs, so that should definitely be very interesting in the coming few days. And then gold and silver got pretty much destroyed right after this. They caught that huge bid prior, breaking that 2,000 mark. And then after the vaccine news came out, a lot of these people kind of took their money out of the safe havens. The uncertainty seemed to somewhat have passed. And you can see this trend continuing even to today. And then delivery, UPS and FedEx. And then a lot of the broad market momentum names. There's a few ETFs that track momentum names, and all these got hammered pretty hard following the news.
If you want to learn 3 more real-world setups that our traders use, including the simple setup that we teach all of our new traders, and the setup that turned one of our traders into a 7-figure big money earner, check out the free webinar that we're currently running. Just go ahead and click the link that should be appearing now at the top right-hand corner of your screen. That will open up the free registration page in a new window, so don't worry, you won't lose this video. You can also visit tradingworkshop.com to register for this free intensive workshop. You're going to learn more in a couple of hours from this trading workshop than from years of online education.
So trade strategy, the best way to capitalize on this would be a basket trade. And this was a very obvious trade. Everyone knew a vaccine was coming at some point. It was more of just a matter of timing. So to capitalize on this, you really needed to be prepared, having the list of the names that you're going to trade on the long side and the short side following the vaccine news. And then to take that one step farther, you should pre-map out hotkeys in a basket. So on our platform, you can put together a basket of different names, and then you can just put that right into a hotkey. But for the long and short hotkeys, I would create a basket with just the leaders. I don't want too many names in these baskets because otherwise it gets a little overwhelming. But the top categories would be airlines. You can go with the individual names such as American, United, Southwest, Delta, or you could just go right with JETS, which is an ETF tracking all the major airline players. And then cruise lines, I would just do cruise lines individually with Carnival, Royal Caribbean. And then Norwegian's optional, but I would definitely stick with Carnival and Royal Caribbean. And then hotel and leisure, Wynn, Marriott, Hilton. And then some of the other optional plays, if you want to be a little more aggressive, you could go with Boeing, some of these financials like JP Morgan, and then theme parks such as Disney, Six Flags, and some of those other names. And then for the short basket, I just stuck with Zoom and Peloton as pretty much the major weight. But if you wanted to be more risk on, then you could also include Roku, Netflix, as well as some of the online retailers such as Shopify, Etsy, and then even GLD. I wasn't too confident in throwing all these names in a basket as they're very volatile, and some of these are pretty high priced stocks. So it could be pretty easy to get whipsawed, but on such significant news, I'm very confident adding Zoom and Peloton into the short basket.
But I like what you're doing here, Sam, and you could certainly do this with other opportunities. For instance, let's say you were waiting for the EV sector, the electric vehicle sector to break out. Let's say, you were waiting for a couple weeks ago Tesla to break out. You could create a basket of first tier, second tier, third tier EV stocks and play that from the long side. Or let's say you thought they got overbought and you were looking for one of those days where they were going to pull in, then you could build a basket for a pull-in trade. You make a very interesting point here, which is, hey, what's going to happen the first week in January when there's the 2 runoff elections in Georgia for the Senate? So if the Republicans win one of those seats, 1 out of the 2 of those elections, or 2 out of the 2 of those elections, then they will keep control of the US Senate, and there will be lots of policies that will be dead on arrival that President-elect Biden may wish for. If 2 of the seats go for the Democrats, there will be policies from President-elect Biden that will be on the table. There will be Democratic priorities that are back on the table. And you could start to game plan for, hey, what if that happens? And build a basket for that. Or, and Dr. Steenbarg was saying this in the morning meeting, you could start to game plan for, hey, what happens if it starts to look like there's going to be more vaccines that come out earlier, and we get out of this even before the end of the spring, like some people are anticipating. What's that going to do to the overall market? Can I build a basket if that news hits the tape to be able to strike? Or you can just run through this for lots of other scenarios. So yeah, I like the idea of you building a basket. I like the idea of you being smart about it. We can apply this to lots of other potential opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned the EVs, and Shark, which is one of the top traders at our firm. He's done a great job using baskets to be involved in, you're naming like the different tiers, like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 EVs. And then when you already have the basket created with the different tiers that and names you want to focus on, just with a single click of a button, you can already be involved. And the funny thing with this basket, so you could have used this 2 Mondays ago, and then last Monday we also got vaccine news, so you could have went and used the exact same basket you created for these stay-at-home versus reopening plays. The third vaccine this Monday wasn't as impactful, but you definitely could have still used this basket as well. So now I'm going to go into a few different charts. So this is just highlighting those 4 categories I was talking about for the long basket. So on the top left corner, we have Jets. You can see pre-market opened around 18, closed the day at 22. For such a low price stock, this is a very, very massive move. Cruise lines, this is just CCL. Same story here, opened 14, closed near 20. Financials, so pretty much it's the same story all around. Financials, open low the day 105, closed 115, which is a very big move for JP Morgan. And then hotels, you can see Wynn caught just a massive bid throughout the day. And then going to the short basket, I just really wanted to focus on Zoom and Peloton, as these two were the leaders within stay-at-home, as well as the most extended and kind of focused names within that category. And you can see Zoom got hit very hard, 114-point sell-off. Similar move in Peloton with a 35-point sell-off. So now I'm going into market timing. So majority of this trade is being ready at the right time, already having the basket in place. And so right when this news drops, you don't have to think too much. You can just go right into your pre-mapped out game plan. And so you can see there is some opportunity right when this vaccine news released at 6:45. You can see the stock PFE, the stock obviously got a huge bid, but some of the names within the basket lagged a little bit. That gave you some opportunity. So you can see this is Jets. This is just an example of, so this is all the different airlines. You can see right when that news hit, it reacted somewhat steeply for pre-market, but it only jumped 20 cents after 90 seconds from the news release. So, I mean, that gives you a minute and a half of opportunity. And then even if you were 5-10 minutes late, as long as you had the baskets ready, you could still get involved. And then on the short side, Zoom got hit very hard, but it was still about a minute after the news broke. So you still could have gotten in with solid prices 1, 2, 3 minutes after the actual news hit. And then going into other kind of market timing opportunities throughout the day. So on the top left corner, we have SPY. And you can see following the vaccine news, huge gap in the pre-market. But then right on the market open, we saw extreme weakness, a period of consolidation, as well as extreme weakness into the close. And something that was pretty interesting is we closed at pretty much the same price that pre-market opened at pre-vaccine news. And then going into some of the reopening plays, you can see after, so I'm on Denver time, but this would be 10:55, like 11 and 11. So pretty much after 11, you can see they all caught a strong bid in the morning. And then while the market was selling off into the close, all of these reopening plays showed relative strength compared to the market. So even if you weren't involved in the pre-market getting some of these entries at the lows, you still could have waited for opportunities and got involved around 11, 12 Eastern. You can see that a lot of them ran somewhat strong into the close and had really strong after hours compared to the relative weakness in SPY. This is just on the close. So that this was the main basket for the stay-at-home names I was following, and you can see there's a common theme with all of these: very steep selling right on the open, as well as very steep selling on the close. And then every single one of these names pretty much closed right at the lows of the day, which is a very strong sign. If you're short, that gives you pretty good confidence to hold the position overnight and hold on to this for a possible multi-day trend trade.
If you see a close like that, you can go flat, and that tees up more likelihood for a second day play in those sectors. So anytime you have something that's really weak on an intraday basis and it closes near the low, that tees up a more likely second day play to follow through. And that's if something finished really strong and finished near the top of its range, we may think that's more likely to follow through to the upside for a second day play. If it's really weak, in this case, the stay-at-home names, then, and it finishes near the low, finishes near the bottom of the range, maybe the bottom 15%, maybe the bottom 20%, 10%, depending on your system, that can set up more of a chance for it to follow through to the downside for a second day play the next day.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's interesting is you're seeing that selling in the stay-at-home names across the sector. So it's not just one of them is weak. There's rotation out of those names.
Yeah, exactly. So rotation out of these names, and then if you go to these reopening, you can see pretty much exactly where that money's rotating into, with every single one of these names essentially closing at the high of the day in that top 15%. So also kind of like what you mentioned, giving you confidence for a second day trade, second day play, as well as holding somewhat of a core position overnight. So it's pretty. So every single one of these names are within those different categories I was talking about, with hotels, cruise lines, financials, energy, XLE, airlines, and then rideshare. And you can see all of these close at that top end of the range. And then what I also touched on earlier was that rotation at 11, the midday rotation, where everything was continued to rotate out of the previous leaders and back into these names, despite SPY being very weak into the close, and then all these names holding up. So that's a great check in your favor, seeing the relative strength coming into all these names. And then something else I had talked about was kind of that rotation from growth into value, and then some of these other sectors. So right up here is the XLK, which is the technology ETF. And then down here is the VYM, which is a value ETF. So I usually watch these just to track. And you can see right when that vaccine news hit, you can see the XLK, which is all the tech stocks, starting to sell off a little bit, while all these value names started to catch a pretty strong bid. Then right on the open, that the strength continued in value. Tech just kind of consolidated for a little and ended up breaking down, being very weak into the day, while a lot of these value names were holding up. So another way to attack this, if you don't want to create a basket with all these different names, you could go with value, like long value, long some of these sectors, like long financials, long energy, short technology, if you don't want to be trading all the individual names. But you can see throughout the day that there's just money steadily flowing into like energy, financials, and then value, while it's very clear where the money was rotating out of. So for overall recap, the most important part of this trade is preparation. And then secondly, I would say timing. For preparation, it just kind of cancels out all the noise within the trade, trying to find what's gapped up the most, what's moving the most, what has the highest RVOL. Rather, you can just come in with the pre-mapped out plan of exactly what you want to do and how you're going to attack it. And then timing, this vaccine, everyone knew it was coming, but no one knew when it was going to actually be released. So it's like, this is kind of like the trade Jake was talking about with Tesla, where he was at his computer every day for like 100 days or however many he said, just waiting for the S&P inclusion. So you could almost treat this in a similar way, but 6:45, everyone's already up doing their pre-market plans. So right when you see that news hit, you need to be ready. You need to be there fast if you want to get the best prices. And then kind of like what we talked about earlier, similar basket trades are going to be around all the time in the future. You could have even used a basket trade for the presidential election. Like if you're anticipating Biden to win, you could have had solar and like all these other names, as well as like what you talked about with the Georgia runoff. So it's mainly just being prepared and then creating these baskets prior to the event that you're planning to happens.
Really good exercise. We used to do this when you guys were interns, where we would talk about game planning, some of the next big trades. And this is something that you guys can do in small groups and bigger groups, where you say, hey, what would happen if XYZ happened? You know, what would we do if the results of the election look like they may for some reason get overturned? Just as a hypothetical, not suggesting that there's much of a chance of that happening. What would happen if there was an attack on Iran? What would happen to oil if we were to see that before Trump leaves office? What would happen if it looks like relations between the U.S. and China are going to deteriorate? Or what would happen if they're going to get a lot better? Before, remember, one of the really good trades for the prior year was the escalation in the trade war between the U.S. and China, and then us walking that back. So there'd be an escalation, that there was going to be a trade war between the U.S. and China, volatility would explode, we could trade the overall market, there were a lot of really good opportunities. And then that would get walked back, and then there'd be a lot of good opportunities. But it was that game planning that we're going to do this if there's going to be an escalation in a trade war. And you, as you're saying, you could have your basket of products and stocks ready to go if that news hit the tape. So it's this thinking of ideas that could really move the market, thinking of ideas that could really move a sector, and building your baskets, doing that as a team. Really good to be doing it as a team, and being ready, and when you see it, being aggressive. Hey, go ahead and click our subscribe button so you don't miss any of the videos that we're producing for you in the trading community. And please take the time to add your feedback in the comments section for what videos you'd like for us to produce next, and what you found helpful from this video. From all of us at SMB, train and trade well.